Welcome to Let's Talk Learning Disabilities with Laurie Peterson and Abby Weinstein. Laurie and Abby spend their days talking about dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and ADHD. They talk to parents of struggling students and adults who have had a lifetime of academic challenges. They want to share those stories along with their own insights with you. So, let's talk learning disabilities.
Hey everybody, this is Laurie.
And this is Abby.
Welcome to Let's Talk Learning Disabilities.
We are bringing you another episode in our 12-part series called Turning Struggles into Triumphs, Parenting Through Learning Challenges.
So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's interview. Have a great day.
Well, hello, Sarah. Welcome to joining us today for our parent series on parents of students with disabilities. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to speak with you and just go over kind of our experience having a child with multiple learning disabilities.
Okay, well, wonderful. We appreciate you being here. And again, thank you so much for being willing to share your own personal stories and to kind of be more vulnerable, and hopefully that will resonate with a listener or a parent who's kind of walking in the shoes that you did walk in previously, and it could help them. So starting out, tell us a little bit about the struggles, either educational and or behavioral, that you observed in your kiddo prior to any type of diagnosis.
Sure. So Alexandra is my child. She goes by Alex, that has dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. Those are her 3 learning disabilities. And she is my second child. So we have a son who's 15 and Alex is 10 now. So my son, going through with him preschool, lower elementary, middle, high school, has never really had any issues at all with learning difficulties. We are in the unique situation that we have dyslexia that runs in the family. So my husband, although not diagnosed formally, because at that time it was just, just to learn it, memorize, things like that.
Exactly.
My husband has, all of the markers for dyslexia. As a child and now as an adult. And then I have some nephews as well on my husband's side that had previously been diagnosed. And so we kind of knew already what to look for.
Yeah, so it was kind of on your radar because
it was something that we already kind of had in the family that knew, hey, this could be a possibility. And so luckily, when my daughter was 3 and she went into preschool, she was in preschool 3 days a week. We already started to notice things right off the bat with her that kind of just pinged, our little spidey senses in the back of our head. So she had a really difficult time learning her shapes. They didn't make sense to her. So like other kids are learning square, rectangle, circle, she had a difficult time differentiating those on flashcards and just in class. And then her letters, she had a really hard time identifying her letters. So when she was 4 years old or 3 years old and other kids are saying A, B, C, she really couldn't do that. And this was very interesting to us because as a baby, she developed very quickly. So when she was 9 months old, she started walking. At 11 months old, she was running through the house, dribbling a soccer ball. We actually have it on video. She was speaking in full sentences by about 18 months. Complete full sentences. And so she developed physically and verbally very early.
Right.
And so she had the words for all of those things. She just couldn't visually identify them on a card. Right. And so it wasn't that, she doesn't have the word for what a square or rectangle is. She was speaking in complete sentences, and was very visually aware of her surroundings. She was very physical, so she's been playing soccer since she was about 3 on a soccer team. And even now she's in select sports, multiple select sports, and a variety of other enrichment activities. And so for us, not being able to identify your shapes and your letters at 3 and 4 and 5 just gave us an idea that, hey, we need to be watching for a little bit.
So you kind of had that gut feeling that something wasn't right. Yeah. She wasn't developing the way she should be developing.
Absolutely. Now, our school, we're in the Texas public school system, and we have a very large district that we are in. And so they have a lot of services available. And I actually ended up being the PTA president of Alex's school when she entered elementary school, and was able to get to know the dyslexia service specialist very well while I was there. And so, working with her kindergarten and first grade teachers as she developed through, they were seeing the same things I was, and we had a very open communication about the things that they were seeing. And so as she entered elementary school, we saw the same things. Still hard, difficult letter recognition, very difficult sound to letter recognition. And even though there wasn't a lot of math being done, even number issues, just how to set up a math problem, what math problems are, a lot of counting on our fingers. Idea of 3 didn't make sense to her. She had to have 3 apples or 3 refrigerators or 3 frogs, but she just didn't know what 3 meant. It didn't make sense to her. So just math.
Needed something more concrete.
Yeah, math conceptually was really difficult. And so our district doesn't like to test for dyslexia until they're 7. So she turned 7 in November, and the day after she turned 7, she was tested. So I'd already had it on the books. I was able to get that done. And we got the results back very quickly, luckily, but it was the holiday season, right? So yes, we knew she was going to have dyslexia. She did. And then the services weren't going to start until January. So our IEP meeting wouldn't be until January. Really getting pulled for any type of intervention wasn't going to happen. But we felt like there's more than dyslexia going on here. Her handwriting was really difficult. Following any type of book or writing was difficult for her. Math, and again, the math concepts are really difficult for her. So we talked to the school and asked for some additional testing for other learning disabilities that dyslexia doesn't encapsulate, right? And they said, that's not as easy as you being in the school and help, we can test dyslexia really quickly, but if we have to do the other things, that goes through a more broad process through the district. We have almost 40,000 students in our district. So getting on that list is pretty difficult. So we actually went through an outside diagnostic testing center to get additional, more comprehensive testing for her to make sure we knew what we were dealing with. She just turned 7. We want to nip it in the bud early, get her the intervention she needs early. So we went through that diagnostic testing center, and from my first phone call to them to getting the results of her testing was 10 days. And so in 10 days from calling them, we got the test and we got the results in our hands, and a very good detail of exactly where her limitations were. And then that's where the dyscalculia and the dysgraphia comes in. We were able then to take those to her school and get a very good comprehensive IEP out of all of those.
Good.
Yeah. So that's kind of.
So you were very fortunate. So when you took the private outside evaluation to the school and shared it with them, it sounds like they were pretty responsive to it. They accepted those additional diagnoses and kind of revised her individualized education plan.
Yes. So I'm very fortunate, and one that I have the luxury of being, having such close access to the school. We had a principal who has a child who has dyslexia. So and who is in the current school district, who's going through the same interventions as my daughter was.
Right.
So we were very lucky in that regard. And our school pretty much said, what do you need? Let's put it in now, because it's easier to take out than it is to add. So if we add it in first grade, she might not need it until she's a sophomore in high school, but it's there now. And once it's there, it's much harder to take it out. You have to intentionally take it out instead of fight to add it. So I was able to really take the feedback we got from the outside testing. And with that testing came literally a sheet of, these are the accommodations that would best fit the learning style for your child. And I handed that to them and I said, this is what I want her IEP. And they put it in there. So it was that easy. So we were very, very lucky to have an elementary school at that time who was willing to just listen and work with us. And I was dealing with administration that was really familiar with these same learning disabilities.
Yeah, I think that was probably really helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
She could relate.
Yes,
and
she
she
can relate.
wanted
Absolutely. Now,
and she wanted Alex to be successful also. She cared.
She did. And I kind of, and I say this, understanding that when we come from a place of extreme privilege in that regard, to be able to get the outside testing, to be able to have such a close relationship with the school administration. On the flip side, Alex doesn't have any, and I'm using air quotes here, behavioral disabilities, right? And so she is an easy student. She is charismatic. She comes in and she'll go, "Hi, Mrs. Jones. How was your weekend? How's your dog?" And she really engages with the adults around her, and she really wants to learn. And so she sits down quietly. She does her work. She knows what her accommodations are, even from a very early age. She understood why and how to utilize her accommodations. And if she couldn't, how to verbalize, because she had the words, "This isn't working for me. Can we try something else?"
Yeah, that's great.
So in a lot of ways, she had that maturity coming in to have the words and know what to say. And she had knowing cousins have these same learning disabilities, knowing daddy has these same learning disabilities. There was no negative stigma. It was, I have blonde hair and blue eyes and I have dyslexia.
Right.
They were all the same.
It wasn't quite as shocking or hard to hear or so foreign, like, what's wrong with me?
Yes, exactly. There was no, I'm struggling because there's something wrong with me. It was, I can remember people's names really well and I have a hard time reading, and so, it's just what it is.
That's great.
It's how her brain works. So we were really fortunate to, one, have the touchstones in place in our lives that could help us, and to already have experiences with those individuals who are having to have accommodations for their own disabilities as well. So and getting intervention so early, getting diagnosed so early, we were able to just make it a part of her daily routine.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I think it's also helpful for them once they get pulled into a dyslexia intervention program, they also start realizing there's other kids around me that struggle with reading or spelling. I mean, you realize I'm not the only one that's having these struggles at school, and this guy next to me and this girl to my right, they're experiencing some of the same struggles. And I think because they're taught in a very different way, the way their brains learn best, they pick up on it quickly and start experiencing successes very quickly. So I think it can help really boost confidence also, getting that intervention and being in that dyslexia intervention group with others.
Oh, absolutely. Some of those kids are her best friends. They're together so much. And we've now moved up from, we're now in intermediate school. She's in 5th grade now. And our intermediate school is 5th and 6th grade. And there's 1,000 students in the school. So it's 5 elementary schools that feed into that one intermediate. So a lot of the time, those kids don't see each other at all, except in dyslexia intervention. She gets to see her little core 5 or 6. And she's so excited because she's missed them. They were together every day since 2nd grade, And so it's almost like a comfort to get back with them and to go through. I don't know, if your listeners, how many of them have children in dyslexia and in dyslexia interventions, but they almost have like a little ritual of sounds and things they say at the beginning of every single class to get their brains on track to decode words, for example. It sounds foreign to me. It sounds like she's speaking another language when they go through all of the little things. But for them, there's a comfort associated with those kids. She definitely has a very sweet friendship with her peers that she's been through the dyslexia intervention with. Yes.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. So I guess, it sounds like she's doing well. And so have you noticed a big difference in her academic performance at home and at school since the diagnosis and since putting some accommodations and interventions in place?
So, just like with everything, disabilities are on a spectrum typically, right? And so talking with her dyslexia specialist and resource specialist at school, her case managers, what we have seen, and then we also had her in outside dyslexia intervention. So in our school uses MTA is their main program. And so we actually put her in an outside program as well. So she was getting MTA in schools, and then 2 days a week she was going to an outside program that was an hour a day, 2 days a week, that was Take Flight. So she was getting 2 different programs at the same time, and there's a lot of overlap with those to just help reinforce, and maybe MTAs explain something better than Take Flight. Take Flight explains it a little bit better. So it was able to just reinforce that learning and hear the same thing in multiple different ways to maybe something would click or wouldn't click.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So we were able to do that. Now, with that being said, Alex has severe dyslexia. So she, even with all of that intervention, with knowing since first grade, with getting, all of the accommodations in place, in fourth grade, she was still at what they expect the beginning of second grade reading levels to be. And so she's still consistently about 2 years behind. However, because her verbal and conversation skills are so strong, she's really done a great job at being able to, one, advocate for other ways to show her knowledge other than written, which in an intermediate school at the size that we are, written is the easiest way for teachers to get knowledge from testing, right? You're testing knowledge. Writing is the easiest way to do it. So we have been encouraging her since third grade to use her speech to text accommodation. So she actually had a laptop when her peers didn't in the classroom, and would get a worksheet and be able to speech to text the answers to her worksheet, and then staple it onto, print it, staple it onto her paper, and they would accept it that way. So the school has been incredibly good, and us advocating for her to start early using those technology accommodations, because if it becomes a part of their early learning, it's less scary to ask for it when they get older, because it's not different and their peers have seen them using it. So it's not weird, right? It's not true. Oh, Alex is having to do this thing that nobody else does. It's just the way that Alex learns. She always has a computer in front of her. Exactly. And so even with all of that, her reading level is still very low, and we are working on it. And we have seen leaps and bounds of improvement, but it is very much still a struggle for her.
Yeah.
So she is aware of all of her accommodations. She is aware of how to ask for them. And she has very frank, direct conversations with her teachers on how to ask for those. So yes, we have seen major improvement, but the improvement goes hand in hand with the confidence to ask for what you need or use what you have, because sometimes she has it, she has the accommodation on her lap, on her computer, or in her lap, literally. But if you don't know to use it, how to use it, or where to find it, it's not going to do anything for you.
That's true.
So it's
That's
not
a
just
good point.
The teacher directing her on how to do it. It's also her going and just utilizing what she has already at her fingertips.
Yeah.
And they're just not going to learn that unless they're shown a few times, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great point. I think a lot of times we do put accommodations in place for students, and we just expect that the teacher and the student are going to understand what we meant by that accommodation and how to implement it, regardless of which subject area it is. So I really think that is great advice to make sure that the student understands the accommodation they have, why they have it, how it can be helpful, and also to be able to explain to their teacher why it helps them. If they need to ask for an accommodation and advocate for themselves, to be able to talk about why it is beneficial, I think is an outstanding skill to have, especially moving forward throughout middle school and high school. Really being able to advocate for your own needs, request your accommodations, and know that they may look different in different classes, different subject areas, is huge, especially, in high school, once you have 7 or 8 different teachers and they have millions and millions of students. So they're all trying to keep up with everybody's individualized education plans or 504 plans. So I think, just the fact that she's comfortable enough and confident enough to say, I need this in order to be successful and do a good job, and she's not afraid to ask for it, I think that's huge. And that's half the battle. I mean, you can't teach self-advocacy, motivation, caring about school, wanting to do well, all of those things. That's great that she has that.
Yeah, I mean, purpose is the reason, right? So what is the purpose for having this accommodation to begin with? If you don't understand what you're trying to get out of it, they're not going to utilize it properly,
Right.
And that, and so for Alex, because we intervened so early and she did not have the stigma of, this is weird, I don't know, there's something wrong with me. It really allowed for us to move past what could be a big roadblock, right? I hate school. This is miserable. I'm getting behind. My brain is on fire. I'm not keeping up. All of those things are roadblocks to education where kids don't want to learn because they feel like they can't. Why am I even trying? It's impossible.
Right.
And we never wanted her to, one, have all those negative feelings associated with school. That's not going to benefit anything. And two, watching your child struggle as a parent who does not have dyslexia, I didn't have these same issues, and going through a book with her, for example, and the word again is on every page and she has read it 7 times. And on the 8th time, she still doesn't know the word again, mind blown. What is happening? Why?
Right.
It's again, you've seen it, right? And so
and as a parent, it's so hard to not be frustrated by that and say, why can you not remember this word
right here? And so for her to understand that I can get beyond this roadblock because I've put something in place to remove it is vital to her still loving school, still, not feeling like she's ostracized from her peers. And in fact, we kind of have with her a little bit, she's so social and she developed socially so quickly. We call it like her dyslexia superpower, right? Is socially, she is so good. She can walk into a room, she can read a room, and she can say, that new girl who just started school is sad. I'm going to go sit with her and invite her over to sit with us for lunch. I'm going to go sit with her and see if she just needs some quiet time. She has that empathy from such a young age, and she knows everybody's names and most of their business. She's just, she developed from a social standpoint so quickly.
Right.
Because
that's great.
But it
is her superpower to feel so comfortable in a room of strangers and to have empathy and good social skills.
Yeah, make friends everywhere. But on the flip side of that, she has friends who will read for her. I'll just read it to you. And so, and so she does have friends who are like, this is hard for Alex, so I'll just do this quick math problem for you. Well, you can't just have your friend do your math worksheet for you,
Right.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword sometimes too, where it's like, we have to separate you from your friends because they're going to read it for you and tell you what it says.
Right.
So
and they're just trying to be kind and be helpful.
Absolutely. But sometimes, she can lean on that a little heavily as well. So just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. We can all do
That's right. Well, and I think it's hard too in this day and age. It's like everything is immediate gratification and we want to know it right now. We want the answer right now. We want it quickly. So, having to put in the extra time and effort it takes to read or to write, when you have dyslexia is something that it's kind of like, oh, it's not fair. It's something so easy and quick for so-and-so, or, someone who has dyscalculia, just it takes them a lot more time and effort to do a multi-step math problem. But I try to always remind parents and students that we all have strengths and weaknesses. So, what's easy for you may not be easy for someone else. And what's difficult for you is, vice versa, not as difficult for someone else. So
yes, and
I think it's great that I'm sure she's taking a lot of those, strategies that she's learning through her dyslexia therapy program and starting to feel a little bit more successful when she opens up a book. She has some strategies now where, wait a minute, I can recognize more words, or I feel like I can sound out this unfamiliar word, or, even though in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, it's going to take a lot of time and extra effort. At least there are probably many days where she feels like I can do this.
yes.
Have the strategies.
Yeah. And as a parent, I am constantly trying to, one, anticipate roadblocks that she's going to experience or problems that are going to come up, and see how can I remove this problem or this roadblock before it impacts her. Mm-hmm. You're trying to balance that with she needs to learn how to remove the roadblocks herself, because she's going to have them her whole life. And so how do you have them too much or not enough, right? Because they're going to have to build up some resilience. And so, for example, at the beginning of the school year, especially moving to a different school, a different administration, they don't know us. We're one of 1,000 kids. She auditioned for the school musical the first week of school. So she didn't know the theater teacher. She didn't know the choir teacher, but her big brother is in musical theater in the high school. And she was like, this is my chance, right? To do what big brother does. But, and she got a role in the play, which was amazing.
That is exciting.
Yeah, so super exciting. It was the first week of school. And so they got their script. And they were going to read through the script in front of everyone on the first day of rehearsals. And so I reached out to her theater teacher and I said, hey, I just wanted to let you know Alex has dyslexia. So the first time she sees something, she's going to have a difficult time reading it. So the first time she sees the script is in front of everyone and she's going to be having to keep up and read it. That might be difficult for her. And that doesn't mean, she's going to memorize her lines because she could memorize like a pro, right? That's kind of how she learned all along and kept up.
Right.
First time in front of everybody might not be the best time to give her that information, right? So I said, go through the lines with her lines really quick, like beforehand. Or if you can send me the script a day early, I'll review them with her. So when she's reading it in front of everybody the first time, it isn't the first time she's actually seen the words. So that's me trying to anticipate roadblocks constantly for her,
That's so smart. Yeah. And that's another way you're being a great advocate for her, and you are anticipating some of those roadblocks. But eventually, I think, and you would probably agree with me, that eventually you want to start having her experience some of those roadblocks on her own, kind of as those quote unquote natural type consequences or natural roadblocks, to see how she is able to overcome them on her own, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think failing is also learning. So
absolutely.
So if she fails at something in a safe space, all we're doing is learning. We're learning that path did not work for us. And so failing for her just means, okay, that didn't work and we can try a different route tomorrow, because we don't penalize failing in our house. And I have made it very clear to her teachers that we look at failing as growth opportunities. And her teachers have been very on board with that. But I do have a really open communication style with her teachers. I reach out and talk to them, and I support their classrooms. And if they need something, I provide the support. I understand that this is a give and take. They have my daughter 8 hours a day, and they're going to see that I don't. I've had some really hard IEP meetings where I've been, and she hasn't been in those, but you're crushed for your kid. Sometimes you're crushed for your kid and you're sad that they're having to go through it, and you tear up and you worry about how are they going to handle high school or college or getting a job. And it's like, you have to remind yourself, they're 8 or 9 or 10. Like, those things are going to worry about themselves. We need to worry about this piece of time, and how do we get them to grow in this piece of time.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. You can't think too far ahead and live your life in fear and cause yourself a bunch of worry and anxiety about what's to come. I mean, the great news is, and something that you can always tell your child that has been diagnosed with dyslexia, is that individuals with dyslexia are very, very successful people. You can go and Google highly successful individuals with dyslexia and learn about all the, entrepreneurs and actors and singers and, business startups and business people and, people that have invented things that have dyslexia. So, yeah, you can't predict exactly what things are going to look like for her, even in high school or college or beyond, but you can remind her that take these strategies, remember them, use the tools you've been taught, use the accommodations that are in place to help level the playing field. But remember that you are very bright and you can be very, very successful. You just might have to put in a little extra effort here and there.
Well, and I think like kids with dyslexia, because of how they learn, are very perceptive, because that is a coping skill from a very young age through development that they have used to cope with the disadvantages of having dyslexia, right? They're very astute, aware, young children. They are perceptive. And so if you, as a parent, are stressed about their learning disability, are ashamed of their learning disability, treat it like it is something, horrible and a huge disadvantage, and it's going to be awful for them, that's how they're going to feel about it, right? And so even though through those IEP meetings when my heart sinks and I feel so sad for her, she never sees that side of, I suck it up at the end of the meeting and go, okay, this is our plan for next year. I let myself feel them and I'm sad for a second. And then I go, okay, shake it off. We got work to do. Right.
Right.
And so if she were to see me or her brother or her dad look at her disabilities or talk about them in a way where she could internalize that or be super bummed about it and sad about it, then I think her wanting to use her accommodations at school, her advocating for herself, all of those things would look much differently because there would be a level of shame associated with it that really she has nothing to be ashamed of. Her, she has the genes for dyslexia and dyscalculia and dysgraphia, and it just is. She has hair.
Exactly.
She has blonde hair, blue eyes. Her brother, and it's fun because her older brother, who is a wonderful big brother to her, he has curly red hair. So we always say, brother has red hair and you have dyslexia. It just is what it is,
It is what it is.
It is. And so
it's a perfect example.
For her, there has never been a stigma associated with it. And I've always been very open with her about these are the things that are going to be harder for you, but there's going to be things that are harder for you too,
Right. That's great.
You can walk into a room and you can know things about people just by reading the room. You know that Sally is sad and Jerry is happy, for example, and how to approach them because that's your superpower. Like I said earlier.
Exactly.
So,
I love that.
Yeah.
And that is so helpful to constantly build her confidence and remind her of all the things she's really good at, because going to school every day, she's going to automatically be reminded of the things that are difficult for her. So being able to point out all of the positive strengths that she has and the things that come easier for her, that's a really great, positive parenting strategy. I love that. And I think hopefully some of our listeners listening to that can, keep that in mind that, the diagnosis only really tells you it helps you understand why things are difficult for your child, and it gives you kind of that plan of action moving forward. If your brain learns this way, this is what we need to do. Or you struggle with reading, writing, and spelling, we need to do this. You struggle with math, we need to do this. But it really does help you, realize like, I'm not dumb, I'm not lazy, I'm not incapable of learning. I learn differently. And my brain is just kind of wired differently and it learns differently. But being able to point out at the same time, look at all these things that are really strong for you and come easily for you. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
So you are a great advocate and, person to help her understand more about her dyslexia and thrive regardless of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that.
We don't, and for new parents whose children have just been diagnosed at any age, don't make their diagnosis whisper words. As adults, we all have whisper words. We whisper, not around the kids, and we don't want the kids to hear. Dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, ADHD, of all of those, they're not whisper words. They're not the boogeyman. Yeah. They're not scary words that we don't want the kids to hear. There's no shame in those words. They are simply a diagnosis that gives us the word to be able to seek the intervention that we need and seek the treatment that we need. So it's just a word. It's a descriptor. It tells us to put us on the path. They are not whisper words in our house. So that's the first thing. Because
I love that.
Your kids will pick up on that. If you're whispering the words, there's shame associated with it, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And even if you don't mean for the kids to pick up on that, they will. And two, we carve out time for wins. My daughter, so Alex is in select soccer. She's in select lacrosse. She's doing theater. We don't come home after a full day of school and say, let's read more. You can't tutor your way out of dyslexia and dyscalculia. Dyslexia. We don't sit down and make her write words. We carve out time for wins. She has been all day long getting intervention and being taught and being pulled for tutoring and additional things. So at night, we play sports. We do voice lessons. We carve out time. We prioritize as a family time and carving out time for wins. We go to the theater. We support our school's other events. We don't sit home because she's struggling, so we need to come home and focus on just what she's struggling on.
Right, exactly.
Only one piece of the puzzle, and their brains are tired, and they need to win. So that's right. Although intervention is important, that can't be their whole story. You have to carve out time for wins. You have to let them win, whatever it is. If your child isn't a sports child, but they love to draw, let them come home and draw for an hour. Let them praise their drawing. Let them win.
Hang that drawing up on the wall.
Right. Carve out time for wins. So that's we don't read as a family every night. There are some nights where we don't sit for 30 minutes and read. There are nights absolutely we do, but there are days when her brain needs a break. And this is not a sprint. We're not going to sprint our way out of it. This is her whole life. So her whole life can't be focused on her disability. It is just one tiny piece of it. And so we definitely, we carve out a lot of our time for the things that she's really good at. And then we spend very focused time on the things we need to work on. Because
I love that.
That's what childhood is, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's great advice. I mean, that was my last thing I was going to say is, do you have advice for parents that are walking in the shoes that you were walking in prior to, evaluation and diagnosis? And I think that celebrating those wins is so huge. I think that's so important. Like, they spend 8 hours a day with demands put on them all day long, and their struggles are evident to them all day long at school. Yep. So yes, you want to, work on some skills a little bit here and there, but doing things that they enjoy and celebrating their wins and letting them enjoy their family and not let family time or mom or dad be this evil person that drills me and makes me do reading, because reading is hard.
Yes. I'm doing that all day long.
I think that's great advice. And I also think I heard you say, kind of go with your gut. Your mama gut in the beginning. You had that gut feeling like things shouldn't be this challenging for her, and we have this history in our family, and so you pushed for the evaluation, right?
Yes.
You really advocated for it.
Yeah, and I've talked to parents who electively put their head in the sand, right? Because they don't want their child to be labeled as different. So it's if you give it the word, then it means it's true, right? So if you get them tested and they're diagnosed with dyslexia, now they have dyslexia. So if you don't have the word, it doesn't exist. And the more that you bury your head in the sand, you are delaying the intervention your child could get. So you, as parents, a lot of time, and I have a teenage son now, we have to set our feelings aside for what's best for our kids. And with teenagers, even more, right? Really have to set our feelings to the side sometimes. But it's
very challenging.
As parents, we have to set our feelings to the side. Whatever stigma that we have or preconceived notion of what those words mean, just like whatever the learning disability is, whatever, or ADHD, a variety of things. We also have preconceived stigmas about that we have to get over, because it is our job as parents to give our kids the resources they need to be successful. And you cannot do that by avoiding and ignoring red flags, because once there's words with it, schools can help, work with your schools. But if you're just making assumptions, then a lot of times the school's hands are tied. If you're preventing, if you're not signing off for testing, and a lot of parents I know don't even want their kids pulled for dyslexia intervention, because then it's like, well, kids will see them pulled.
Exactly.
But I'm not raising those other kids. I'm raising my daughter. And if it's going to help her, then let's give it to her. And we can always, if it's not working, if it doesn't work, we can always take her out of it and try
exactly
something.
Right.
So I think,
and that's where you weigh the pros and the cons, so maybe you feel like she's going to be feeling negative or stigmatized for 3 or 4 years while being pulled for dyslexia intervention, but then for the rest of her educational career, she has all these different tools and strategies to help her thrive regardless of having dyslexia, and be very successful and feel good about her schoolwork and her capabilities.
And talk to your kids. Even at 6, 7, 8 years old, we and I've had, I've definitely done this, where you steamroll and you think, well, I know what's best. But a lot of times, if you just say, did you go to dyslexia class today? Yeah. How was it? Oh, it was fun. What did you do? We did these things. So you didn't feel, and you didn't feel like it was different than being in regular class. Oh no, it was great, Mom. I'm learning, like they will tell you how they feel, or it was awful and I didn't like it and I didn't learn anything. And, so you need to continue to have a conversation with your kids at the, at their level, that they'll tell you, they will tell you how they learn best and if it's working or not. And we as parents often forget to talk to our kids,
Right.
We look at a grade
their input.
Yeah. We look at a grade on a paper and say, oh, it's obviously not working. Or we look at a grade on a paper that is working when it's in spite of what's happening, not because of what's happening,
Exactly.
And so even when they're little, they still have agency, and let them tell you how they feel about it.
Right.
And so really
I think that's great advice too.
Yeah, that's really, because as parents, when we see a problem, we want to fix it.
Absolutely.
We forget to talk to the kids about it.
Exactly. And they do have their own views and opinions and feelings, and I think they are smarter than we give them credit for, and more perceptive and worldly, and so I think that's great advice also, to make sure to talk to your kids and get their input and their feedback. So thank you so much, Sarah. I really, really appreciate your time and for being so vulnerable and honest with everybody, and really sharing your experiences and your story. And I'm excited to hear more about how she's doing in a few more years, and we will push through and make sure that, we are providing her everything she needs to be successful.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing more of your podcasts coming up. They've been really informative, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good. Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us today. In our show notes, you can find information about today's talk, as well as links to resources and other episodes. If you have questions about today's talk, have ideas for future episodes, or just want to stay connected, you can contact us through Diagnostic Learning Services on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So, let's keep talking learning disabilities. This podcast is sponsored by eDiagnostic Learning. You can find more information at www.ediagnosticlearning.com.